Hello and welcome to Cargo Masterminds presented by cargo.one. My name is Reggie John and you are watching Cargo Masterminds presented by cargo.one. This is our weekly episode where we bring leaders from global logistic companies for a one-to-one conversation. Chris Leach founded Air Charter Service or ACS in 1990 along with his wife Tina in the basement of their UK family home in Kingston, southwest of London. 30 years later, ACS today is a global leader in passenger and cargo charters. ACS now has a network of offices across the Americas, Europe, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. ACS is a reliable cargo charter partner to hundreds of customers worldwide. My guest today is Dan Morgan Evans, Global Director of Cargo at Air Charter Service. Dan has been with Air Charter Service for close to 20 years. He joined ACS in 2002 as Cargo Account Manager. Dan went on to become the head of cargo business at ACS in 2016 as the Global Director. Dan joins me in this episode of Cargo Masterminds to discuss the business of cargo chartering in the age of a pandemic that brought passenger aviation to a halt for a very long time, resulting in severe restrictions in access to cargo capacities in the bellies of long-haul wide-body passenger flights. Dan, welcome to Cargo Masterminds.
Thank you, Reggie. Thank you for having me.
Dan, last 20 months, were they the busiest period for the cargo division of Air Charter Service in its history?
You could say that, yeah, definitely. It's been incredible. It's been, the busiest period by far. No time to stop or breathe, really. No time to cut my hair. Something unprecedented, something that will never happen again, I don't think.
Dan, can you give us a sense of the scale and complexities of cargo charter operation that you did in the last 20 months, particularly from the point of getting access, sourcing of freighters?
I mean, complexity-wise, it's obviously we know that the history of the pandemic, March last year, really, well, actually earlier than that for us, I think, really, when the coronavirus hit in even starting in China, our first flights really for the pandemic were conversely flights into China sending PPE. And I think that at that point, we picked up a few bits of business coming out of South Africa, flying PPE into China. And then obviously, I mean, those in the know maybe have already realized that something terrible was about to happen. But I think the general population kind of just saw it as a sort of background story, picking up a couple of flights for us going into China, as I said. And then as we moved through February and then into March, then obviously March is when it all kind of kicked off towards the end of March, and then April, May, June, and it just continued through there. And those first few months, not only were we contending with huge demand for PPE for customers all around the world, every country pretty much was needed PPE, and the hub of the world really for that sort of stuff was China. We had this huge demand, but coupled with that was traditionally 100% kind of office-based working around our 28 offices around the world. Suddenly we were all working at home, and our IT team had to quickly put in place the ability for every one of our consultants around the globe to be able to work seamlessly from their bedrooms, from their laps, from their ironing boards, their kitchen sides, whatever it was they were able to do, sending laptops out to every single one of our brokers. So it, with this huge demand was this kind of massive kind of internal infrastructure we had to build in order to cope with it. In terms of complexities, I mean, I think that ACS were probably highly fortunate in the fact that it's almost like, I think I've said this before, it was almost like Chris Leach had been planning this. And you mentioned the start in 1990. I remember in 2002 when I joined ACS, in our first ever conference, he put a slide up on the wall. And bearing in mind we had London and Moscow at the time and a little operations in Ostend that we had. And he put up these offices that he was going to have all around the world in the next 10, 15 years. And I'd only been at the company for about 2-3 months. And I kind of went, oh, okay, whatever, typical kind of entrepreneur dreaming type scenario. And then, here we are 2021 or at the beginning of 2020 with this huge network. But most importantly for us was our network that we had in China, our Beijing office and our Shanghai office and our Hong Kong office as well. It just meant that we had this infrastructure that allowed us to cope with the complexity of the nature of what we were doing in terms of the demand that was coming out of the airports in China, out of the factories in China. And obviously, many of our customers were not based there. They're all based in Europe, they're all based in the US, in South America, in Africa, in Australia. So we ended up, the customers that we were dealing with in our offices outside of China were working hand in hand with our Chinese offices to get this mad rush of PPE delivered to all around the world, basically. And you'll probably ask me later, but I'm not going to be able to answer you in terms of how much we did and what we did. The figures, we kind of stopped counting at one point. I think that back in May last year or June last year, I think we had delivered PPE to something like 65 different countries around the world. And that number did grow. And so, yeah, it was a huge operation involving every single one of our brokers. And also coupled with that, I think you'll probably talk about this later, but the kind of the utility freighters, the preighters, whatever anyone wants to call them, we are obviously not just cargo. We have commercial jets and we have private jets, among other divisions within ACS. But it was that we also managed to be able to lean on our other divisions, on the commercial jet department, our ACMI team, in order to find capacity that maybe wasn't in our repertoire, in our armory as a cargo charter broker, because we deal with cargo airlines. So it was a huge benefit to have this other big division that we have around the world, and the ACMI team plus our Chinese offices. So although it was complex and on a very large scale, I think the team did a great job. I think it's a real plus point of what we do and how we've been doing and what we've been building up to all this year. So it was difficult, it was tiring, it was 24/7, but it worked, and it worked well, I think.
Then how significant volume of cargo-only passenger charter flights, or what we call right now is the freighters, in your overall volume of charter operations?
Yeah, it was significant. Yeah, it's, I think that, I can't remember quite when it was, but it was, probably a few weeks into the operation when suddenly the cargo aircraft were becoming more scarce, and we suddenly realized that this is going to be a big deal. So we started, scouring the markets and, getting these aircraft to fly cargo only. But, it's part of day-to-day business. It's still, to be honest, it's still, we charter a lot of freighters at the moment. So in terms of the balance, what it is, I don't know, but it's significant. It's a big part of what we're doing. Freighter availability is scarce at the moment. So, these utility freighters or freighters do have a huge role to play still.
Then let's come to your declared numbers for the year January 31st, 2021. The gross sales for ACS increased by 86% to 887 million pounds in comparison to the previous year. Could you specify the cargo charter growth rate and sales revenue?
I don't know. We don't particularly like to sort of split that out on what it is, but obviously the cargo growth was significant amongst that. I think you said at the beginning in the introduction about the kind of the passenger world coming to a standstill. It did, obviously, in the middle of last year, but right at the very beginning of the pandemic, we saw a boom in our passenger business as well. So it wasn't like it just suddenly died a death during last year. Our private jets market was up massively as people were kind of scarpering around the world, trying to get home, doing stuff like that. So we saw a real spike right at the beginning of the pandemic. And again, with our commercial jets team, we did a lot of repatriations. So there was a really busy part of the year for them right at the very beginning of all this. So although obviously once everyone was in lockdown, everyone would be repatriated, the passenger market, as you said, kind of cargo was a significant part of it. But again, as the world started to wake up, things really started to build up again for certainly for the private jets division. That was once borders started to open a little bit, and people were going on holidays again, and business travel started to happen a little bit. So we had a real spike in our private jets. So although cargo was a significant increase, clearly by the numbers you can see and by what was going on, it's not to say that our passenger side of the business wasn't doing above what was expected of that side of the business. So that was really pleasing to us as well. So all around it was a solid year. And as you say, it's up to January the 31st, 2021, because we have an odd financial year starting February the 1st, which is why that is. But it was significant for cargo, but it wasn't a bad time for our passenger departments as well.
We are still in the peak season for air freight, and with supply-demand mismatch not likely to end soon, how you would expect to close the year ending January 31st, 2022?
Not a million miles away from 2021. This quarter, this final part has been busier than last year. So I think that last year, obviously there's still a large part of our business is to do with COVID. We're still doing a lot of test kits flying around the world. This time last year, obviously there was this capacity crunch still going on, well, happening at the same time. We're having COVID stuff going on, but the world was, we started to see a few more lockdowns again last winter. Here in the UK, we were going into a lockdown in December. So it wasn't quite the sort of full on that it is this year. You've got both, the pharma kind of the COVID side of the business still very, very high. But coupled with that, you've got this huge kind of normal commercial cargo flying around the world with the capacity constraints. We're flying everything from fashion retail to just general retail. We flew, Christmas trees in charters the other day. I've seen inquiries this morning for metal boxes, for tins to store things in. I mean, it's just everything. The kind of cargoes that we're moving this peak season literally can be anything at the moment. It's not traditional kind of peak season, maybe consumer electronics or consolidated cargo that's just buying up capacity to try and move it. It's literally anybody can come in with an inquiry at the moment. So it's crazy. It's crazy busy right now, and finding capacity is tough. But like I said, we've got a large network, both for passenger and cargo planes, which means that we can pretty much find a solution at some point or another. I think that the biggest problem really, or one of the biggest problems at the moment, is not really the capacity. It's the capacity, or the air capacity. It's the capacity of the airports. It's little local lockdowns happening. COVID restrictions, whether it's in certain provinces in China. Crew rest not being able to happen, or there's so much in terms of what's sort of driving this difficult period. Well, peak period, very good period, but also very difficult operational period. And that can be warehouses, that can be people working in the warehouses, that can be COVID restrictions, whatever it is. It's tough. So it's not just the capacity that makes it difficult right now. It's the capacity all around in terms of what the airports can cope with.
Let's talk about also the elevated freight rates, and it's been there for the last almost 2 years, and it continues to be. Do you expect cargo charter prices to remain unusually high for the coming few months or few quarters, particularly on trans-Pacific routes? And when do you expect it to be more rationalized and stable?
I mean, we're forecasting next year to be pretty strong still. Obviously, once we get over the sort of hump of Christmas and we get the other side of it, I'm sure the rates will come down a little bit, but normalizing, my guess is that's not going to happen straight away. We're going to still see, strong demand, high prices, and then again I think it will ramp up again towards the end of next year, same as it has. Maybe not quite so high, maybe not quite so difficult. There'll be more capacity coming into the market. I guess the pressure will be taken off as we assume that some of the passenger routes will start to increase in frequency, so therefore the belly freight will come back into the market a little bit, but it's not going to happen overnight. And we kind of know that because China is obviously such a big part of all of this, they're much more cautious and restrictive on travel. So that's going to, until that resolves itself completely, I think we're going to continue in this sort of heyday or purple patch or whatever you want to call it for cargo. I think it's going to continue for a little while. So certainly we don't expect it to drop off, back to pre-pandemic levels next year. After that, if I could tell you that, I would be I'd be a millionaire. I don't know. It would be crystal ball stuff at that point. I think everyone has their own ideas. I think it will settle down again. 2023 probably will be back to some sort of normality.
Early on in the pandemic and practically most of 2020 and early 2021, the main priority cargo commodity on cargo charters was PPE, but ACS has cargo charter solutions for key verticals like oil and gas, automotive, aerospace, animal transport, and onboard courier. Are those businesses back to pre-COVID levels? How do you look at them and how do you evaluate them?
Some are back to pre-COVID levels, some aren't. It depends what it is. Obviously, we work in a lot of aerospace and AOGs and stuff like that. That's not, if I'm honest, that's not back to pre-COVID levels. It's bound not to be. There's not as many airplanes flying around the world with passengers on board, so that's not back. I guess that some of the more commercial cargoes, we can see that we get a lot more requests for project stuff coming up. The automotive industry, although there's obviously a major shortage of semiconductors around the world, which is causing an issue with car production, and not just cars. I mean, sort of any consumer electronic production. That's although it's very busy. It's our domestic US, for example, is big automotive sector, and Europe is a big automotive sector. It's doing well. It's still busy, but I expect next year, I'm predicting the next year will be busier for us. I think that will be where that sort of market comes back strong. Obviously, oil and gas prices, the oil and gas prices are very high at the moment. So, traditionally, that would result in some charters. So that business is steady, I would say. I wouldn't say it was booming, but it's steady, and I'd expect that probably to continue to growth with growth into next year. But yeah, generally, I guess the kind of things that we're being asked for would indicate that people are trying to get moving again, industries are back working again, and it will come back to normal pre-pandemic levels quite quickly during next year. I think that will be part of why next year will be good. We'll be in a situation where we will have back, all that business will be back, how it was previously, plus some extra business, I think.
Dan, strong demand, very restricted capacity and elevated price, that going to be remain from my discussion with you in the last few minutes, is going to continue at least till the end of next year. How have you been able to align your customers to the new reality and market conditions? Because you work regularly with some of your regular customers.
I mean, it's so well publicized what's going on in the world. You don't have to be in the air freight industry to know the supply chain issues. It's in every newspaper in every country in every world. There's shortage of truck drivers, shortage of capacity, port problems, ships off the coast of Western America. So it's not, I don't feel like it's something that's a shock to people. And bearing in mind that most of our customers are freight forwarders. They're in the industry, they know what's going on. It's not a shock to most people, I would say. I mean, it's a shock because things are so expensive and prices are so high, but it's not like we're breaking the news to them, put it that way.
But do you expect to see a model shift from ocean to air?
I've answered this like this, that if I compare this to the private jet world, and don't quote me on the figures because like I said, I'm not in the private jet world, but I believe the figure is something like 20% of people that can afford to go by private jet actually did pre-pandemic. But post-pandemic, the other 80% of those people that can actually afford private charters have started to buy private charters. So we've had a huge growth in the number of customers in our private jet sector. Now, the same has kind of happened in cargo charters. People that wouldn't normally charter a plane are chartering a plane. Now, we're assuming in the private jet world, it won't go, those 80% that weren't chartering before are suddenly going to stop chartering. Some of it will stick. In the cargo world, I think the same thing will happen. It will stick with some of those customers. It's kind of, they've understood the benefits of charters, although they're paying a high price for them right now, but there is a benefit in terms of kind of the just-in-time stuff, the on-demand, the fact that you're controlling your own capacity, you can take it from point A to point B, you're not relying on connections, so you're not relying on any kind of point-to-point, the point of this is that the customers get what they ask for now, rather than relying on trying to get around the houses. So I think that some of it will stick. I'm hoping some of it will stick. And I think that what's happened certainly over the last few months is that, we've opened this opportunity has opened their eyes to other ways of doing their business, other ways of using the supply chain. So yeah, I think that we will gain some new customers because of what's been happening.
Part of my earlier question was also about, have you seen a sudden spike in the demand for charters, particularly because of the port congestion and the non-availability availability of containers and exporters, importers wanting to get their products into the market right at the time?
There's definitely been a spike. I think that those people that don't transport stuff constantly all the time and are not massively aware of the restrictions or the unavailability of like containers and stuff, have been caught a little bit unawares. And when they've gone to do their usual shipments that they do once a year, twice a year, whatever it is, have been told no, they can't do it, they won't get there in time. That's pushed them into air freight, that's pushed them into charters. So yeah, there's definitely been a spike. I mean, I think it's taken us a little unawares of like how busy this would be this final quarter of the year. So we were predicting it to be pretty busy. I mean, we were forecasting a very busy period, but it's way above expectations as far as I'm concerned. Like I said, I didn't believe we would be ahead in this final quarter of what we were last year, but we are at the moment, way ahead of where we were at this time last year. So it's there's definitely been a spike, and I kind of sit there going, God, there can't be too many more customers out there pushing for charters, but every day the bookings come through, the inquiries come in. So it's there's been a spike. Certainly, I mean, where are we now? November's been unbelievable, and December forward bookings are already huge. And I think that's also another thing that's very much changed in our business over the past 20 months. Not have a huge amount of forward bookings. Cargo charters are not something that you generally kind of choose to do. Certainly the ad hocs, the lead times are quite small often, but now, we've seen much longer lead times to our charters. I mean, that may be down to availability, but mostly it's down to the fact that, our customers recognize what the situation is with the supply chain and have booked up aircraft early, knowing full well that they'll need them. It's been incredible. So I think that December is going to be just as strong as November, if not stronger. And then January, we'll see what happens. I mean, we normally would expect a big drop-off in January, but I'm sure there will be a drop-off, but I don't know how big that drop-off will be.
Then, do you think freighters, the main tech capacity, will play a critical role to global air freight industry even after the full belly capacity comes into play with the return of the full wide-body long-haul passenger services?
I would be amazed if it didn't. I think that one thing that certainly in the middle of last year, I can remember a lot of talk about people suddenly realizing that the freighters had become a less sort of fashionable mode of transport over the last 20 years, and then something like this really brings it into focus that actually we need freighters. The world needs freighters. They will play an important part going forward. You can see, the kind of sort of drive towards conversions and buying freighters and Airbus and people announcing new freighter versions coming out. And it will be important. I think the belly freight thing is, it's difficult to know where where it's going to end up really. In my view, that probably pre-pandemic, there was overcapacity really in the market. The airlines were doing probably routes that they didn't necessarily need to do. I mean, they could have pulled back and made more money, it'd been more economical. And so I think that we'll probably see less destinations on passenger routes than we've seen previously. I don't know how quickly we'll get back up to that pre-pandemic level. I think that we'll see some of the older aircraft not going back into the air again, or certainly not going back in the air with passengers on board. The lighter, more economical sort of plastic airplanes, I always call them, the freight capacity on these is not so massive as it is in, let's say, 777-300 or something. So that belly capacity is not going to be as huge as it was pre-pandemic, I don't think. So I think that, I think freighters will become an important part. We were already going to the big e-commerce market. The world had changed drastically over the past 20 years anyway. But putting the world into a lockdown and making everyone do everything online for a huge amount of time last year just pushed us quicker into that scenario of just online shopping. Those people that hadn't done it before were forced to do it. So e-commerce I think it was when I was in India, Air Cargo India, must have been about 4 years ago. I think I was on a panel with Atlas and Cafe, I think it was, and Etihad, and they were saying back then that, even though the buzzword was e-commerce and how much the air freight's influenced by e-commerce, it only made up about 10% of the entire air freight at that time. I don't know what the figures are now, but it's certainly increasing, and it's going to get bigger and bigger. So freighters have got to be part of that model. Otherwise, it's not going to work. So it's in short, yes, I think freighters will play a big role in the market going forward.
Dan, your thoughts on the variety of passenger to freighter conversion programs underway now and the increasing number of orders for converted freighters of various types, besides the recent news of new production freighters from both from Boeing and Airbus, and there are already orders for the Airbus A350 freighter.
I think we all know. I mean, I've been in ACS for 19 years, but I've been in aviation since 1999. At that time, since I've been in it, we've been in many ups and downs. It's very cyclical. Obviously, the pessimistic side of me, the doomsday scenario side of me says, in a couple of years' time, we're going to be in a situation where there's huge amounts of overcapacity. Rates are going to go through the floor. And, it's going to be, again, a difficult time for air freight, for cargo aircraft, probably. But like I said a minute ago, I think that my positive side of it, I think the network of belly freight and the capacity that will be out there will have changed. The dynamic will have changed. So although there'll be much more capacity in the market, I think I'm hoping that it won't be to a point where we've too much overcapacity in there and everyone's then struggling and fighting, and it's a fight to the bottom on the rates. And that's not good for anyone. I mean, it's good for possibly people moving their cargoes, but at the end of the day, you'll end up seeing airlines go under. That's not good for the market. We need to not fall into a boom and bust scenario. We want to try and keep it in a sensible flux where it's not not in a boom or bust. But look, it's difficult to answer what's going to happen. Hopefully we'll be in a scenario where we'll try and stabilize freight, and air freight will be on a good trajectory in the few years to come.
Dan, the final question, your reflections on how the pandemic has changed businesses across industries, and what are the biggest learning that you have picked up for yourself and the team that you lead at ACS in the last almost 2 years?
We've learned that I think that the world has certainly changed, and online communications is increased massively. I mean, we're here doing this now over Zoom. I think the one thing for me certainly is, even though my team is spread around 28 different offices around the world on God knows how many different time zones, I speak to them more. There's the communication, oddly, between our offices is massively more now than it was pre-pandemic, and that we always talk about at ACS the flow of knowledge between people that work here, finding solutions for customers, the network that we have enables us to do that. And I think the pandemic has increased that massively for us, and I guess we call them inter-office deals when we're working within ACS. And during the pandemic, those deals between offices has increased massively. We work together so much more coherently, and that's the point of what ACS has been trying to build, is this network for such a long time. If we didn't work with our other offices, we might as well be just little individual companies or small bedroom brokers or whatever it is. It's that gives us our strength. I think our ability to be more mobile in terms of what we do as a workforce. I don't know whether it's good or bad, but it feels like I work 24/7 now. I was working 24/7 anyway, but it was always off a mobile, or it was while walking around. But I'm here now, sitting in my house, in my office. I wake up in the morning and I fire up my computer before I've even walked my dog. It means that we're much more mobile, much more able to move with the times, agile, I guess, as a company. That makes it different. I think that sometimes when you grow to a certain size and you're all in the sort of fixed offices and working with your customers, you can get a little cumbersome. But I think that during this we've become much more light on our feet and agile as a company, and being able to work quicker. And it's also, I don't know how much I'm sure there's been stuff in the press about ACS investing in technology. That again, things like this drives things forward much quicker. And obviously we've had a pretty good time, so it means that we can continue to invest in the technology, and it's not something that perhaps is out there in the public domain all the time, but what we do behind the scenes in terms of our own internal systems, we're always looking to try to improve efficiencies. within our broker force. And those efficiencies really are to enable our customers to get faster solutions, better solutions, more sort of solutions that will be tailored towards the customer and keeping the cost down for them as well, which is obviously tough at the moment in terms of trying to keep the cost down. But that's what we're trying to do. So that's certainly something that we've learned over the last 20 months. And then, it's opened our eyes to other customers, other business, stuff that perhaps we weren't doing previously, and now we've started to do. So I think going forward, that's only going to be good for ACS.
Dan, it was such a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you.
That was Dan Morgan Evans, Global Director of Cargo at Air Charter Service. I hope you enjoyed watching this interview. If you like what we do, please do share it among your networks. Also, if you are not a subscriber of our YouTube channel, please do subscribe now and click the bell icon so that you do not miss any of our new videos. Join me next Monday as I bring a new guest for a one-to-one conversation here in Cargo Masterminds presented by cargo.one. Until next Monday, take good care of yourself and have a very fruitful week ahead. Thank you.